Well, hello there. We meet again. Hi, everybody. We're back this week to kind of continue talking about grades and student feedback and how that can play a role in teachers' decision making. So one thing I didn't mention in the last episode was that students who are categorically failing, which right now we call that NX score. So if you saw episode 4, I talked about how students who are currently not passing are considered incomplete and they get this NX grade until they either complete the work or it turns into a failing grade after the deadline. Students have about a full semester after that grade is assigned to make up the work. So if they were given that in the fall, they have all of spring to make up whatever they did in the fall. The rate right now is around 60 to 70% of students getting that NX, the incomplete, meaning they have a score of less than 65%. Typically in a traditional classroom in my class with more or less the same kind of content and curriculum, it was almost the exact opposite. So about 65-75% of students were passing. So it's a difference, of about 30% maybe from pre-pandemic to pandemic of an increase in students who are failing. And I started to look at why is that? Other than the obvious reasons that we all know about the pandemic and how much this has affected everyone, are there some things that teachers can do or schools can do that might mitigate some of the issues or the barriers that students are having? So let's take a look. What I did is I took all of my student data from my learning management system and I plopped it into a spreadsheet to manipulate a little bit and color code, do some conditional formatting to see what's really going on. Hopefully this is going to provide me with some information about barriers that students are having or allow me to engage in dialogue with students that aren't performing as highly as another group of students and try to figure out if there's ways I can mitigate some of those barriers. So basically I sorted the students, each row represents a different student. This is their marking period score right now. There's about 2 or 3 weeks left. All of the zeros, I just color-coded gray. Right now, we're not going to address the zeros. Those could be a number of reasons, but these are students who haven't been engaged at all the entire marking period. And right now, my focus is on students who have had some engagement, even if it's very minimal, to, most engagement. So I color-coded into a few groups. So everybody in purple over here, purple-pink, these are students that got anywhere from a 1% to a 30% in the class, or they're currently at that point. Then we have this bluish group that is anywhere from a 30% to a 64%, meaning they're close to passing. These guys are a little further, but they're somewhat engaged, but they're not quite at the point that they're going to receive the credit. So what can we do to help them get to that stage? So the other thing that I did is I looked at all of their assignments. There's different assignment types. So lab counts as 20% of their grade, quizzes and projects is 40, notes and something called book widgets, which is an interactive assignment on the web. These combined along with optional discussions count as the remaining 20%. So I wanted to figure out, all right, well, what percent are they getting in each of those categories out of 100? And, how well are they doing in those categories if they're doing anything at all? And on this chart, it's color-coded bright red. If they got a 0, it's color-coded this kind of pale orange. If they got, some positive score, but it's pretty low. And then if they got a little bit higher, it's yellow. And if it's green, it means, they're getting at least a passing score within that category. It's important to note that obviously because quizzes and projects and then this combined section is 40%. I think I misspoke and said 20 before. But these are counting as the majority of the grade. So labs, even if you have 100 in lab, may not have as much impact on this marking period score. So it's important to note that. If we look at the data here, we can see that the lowest engagement student group, so students who are getting between 1 and 30%, you can see, so this is, each column represents a student, and it goes in ascending order. So this is that student who had the lowest, so they have a 3% overall in the marking period. They only completed one assignment type and got 6% on that assignment type. And this is that red color, so red is representing quizzes and projects. So this person, not very engaged, they probably did part of a quiz, but not much going on. Now you can see the first few students are doing one assignment type, right? This student's doing quizzes and projects, this student is doing notes. These two are doing labs, the blue is labs, cut off here. These guys are doing quizzes and projects. Then we've got a student doing optional discussions, which is kind of interesting. They did none of the mandatory assignments, but a bunch of optional discussions. Then we start to see some students do more than one assignment type. So there's kind of this threshold here. And if we look at the chart, we can see that threshold is around 10%. So when their marking period grade gets about 10% and higher, you start to see there's a little bit more engagement. Students are doing more, which makes sense because the grade is increasing. And then you start to see, so these are just two different assignment types represented by the colors. Then we start to see 3 assignment types, etc. We kind of keep going. Obviously, the higher the bar, the more they're doing overall because they're getting a higher percent in each of those categories. But we can see that yellow and green and a little bit of red happen to be the assignment types that we see more in this category here. So they're doing yellow, which is notes, some of them, right? This particular student did really well in the notes. And then they're also doing the green assignments, which are book widgets. So book widgets, lots of students like because it's interactive and they get instant feedback on whether their answers are correct. Resources are built in, so they don't have to open multiple tabs. So it's really nice for this universal design for learning. And then when we start to look at the mid-level engagement students, so these are students getting 30 to 64%. They're a little bit higher. You can see that every single one of them has more than one assignment type. So they've dipped into the different assignments. And we can tell blue is across the board, but it's pretty low, right? A few students are doing a bit better, some 60s, 70s, 100. So blue, remember, is the labs. Labs are interesting because it requires the students to be in person, or not in person, but on the Zoom call. They get pretty supported Zoom calls in order to go through the lab. They still could do it without the call, but that might be why so many of them are completing it. We see very little of the red. Remember, red is quizzes and projects. So that's also interesting. We see more of the red over here with the higher scores. Remember, these scores are in ascending order, starting with around 30% and going up to 64. Notice that the only orange, which is the optional discussion, is over here. That makes sense though, because we don't have, if you don't have to do an assignment and you're struggling with the work that you have, it would make sense that you might not do that. And again, we see green is the favorite. This is the book widget assignment. These are the interactive. We can see that there's pretty positive, some are low. This one's 20. But we see pretty positive percentages with that category. The yellow, however, even though we see a lot of it, we don't see it for everybody. And we don't see a very big percent. So 43, 25, 25, 25, 50, 18, 25, 62, and 50. So this is the only one that got really above 50. So why is it that students aren't doing the notes? What is it about the notes? And that's the question that really that stood out for me in terms of what information do I still need from students that can help support my understanding of what's going on. So my next step here is to form a focus group and I've already engaged in a dialogue to get students involved in the focus group. Hopefully they will show up, or some of them will show up, to give some feedback about what's going on, particularly with the notes, because, or any feedback, but if the notes really aren't being done and there's some, instructional approach that could be changed, that's an easy fix for me, and hopefully a really productive fix for students in order to engage in the content more.
Trying to do all your classwork?
Yeah,
Okay.
so just managing your time and having to, do all these assignments and figure out what to do when, is that part of it? Do you feel like you make a pretty good schedule? So I want to know, what do you feel that you have the most difficulty from when you're taking notes? Even though we anticipated this, students started to talk about how writing notes and knowing what to write was difficult for them. It was at this point that students really recognized that they're having difficulty knowing what to write as their notes and how to explain the videos that were meant to be instructional for them. In previous units, we had done a template for an outline, and so we started to review that for them and ask if that was something that they wanted to have again. Many of them replied that yes, they would appreciate that, as well as some other scaffolds. So I think the moral of the story here is that students aren't always speaking up about how things are going, and especially in the remote setting, you don't have as much access to them as a teacher. So, you're sending an email, they're not responding. You're sending surveys, they might not all fill that out. So really getting that student feedback about how things are going, what needs to be changed, is the most valuable thing a teacher can have. These are easy solutions that I can just tweak with my class, and hopefully will be invaluable to the students that need those extra supports.